You're going to have to talk real loud or they won't be able to hear you, though.
I'm Jim Obeer. I'm your Red River County GOP Chair. And I want to thank y'all for coming out this evening. And I want to thank the Mayor for allowing us to use the community center tonight to host candidate Chris Spencer for HD1 primary in March. Now we do have a dignitary here, don't we? No?
I'll recognize him.
You're going to recognize him? So anyhow, with the whole thing with Marvin Nichols going on, Chris has given her his word. He wins the election over Gary Van Dever, that he is going to fight as hard for that to stop Marvin Nichols as he is for property taxes, or no property taxes in this case. But anyhow, with no further ado, I would like to introduce Chris Spencer, the candidate for HD1.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. He was speaking about dignitaries. Now, I think that's a real strong word when we recognize people, but there are some dignitaries here tonight. In Mayor Marcella Dean of Anona. We have Mayor Hinesley from Bogata. And we have, besides my grandson, who's 9 years old, the most eligible bachelor in Titus County. The second most eligible bachelor in Titus County is the Honorable Kent Cooper, the Titus County Judge. Judge Cooper, I just met a wonderful couple here on the back row, and they just moved to Sugar Hill. They asked me if I knew where Sugar Hill was.
Don't tell them why you know.
That's right. Y'all, thank you very much for coming out tonight. I'm Chris Spencer. I'm from Cass County, Hughes Springs, Texas. I'm a businessman, a father, a grandfather, a husband, a believer. In fact, Judge Cooper and I attend church together at First Baptist Church in Mount Pleasant. I'll tell you a story in a second about how Judge Cooper and I met. But what has started my involvement, and specifically where it relates to water, is that Governor Abbott in February 2018 appointed me as chairman of the Sulphur River Basin Board, the SRBA. Now, the SRBA to some people is met with skepticism because in the past, the Sulphur River Basin Authority, many of the members were known to be pro-development. To give you the background of the Sulphur River Basin Authority, it is constituted with the conservation, remember that's the first word, the conservation and development of the state's natural resources within the Sulphur River Basin. So it's the word conservation and development. Always remember that. When the governor appointed me to that board, folks, when I tell you I knew nothing about water, I didn't know anything about it. And that's precisely why he put me on it. It was like drinking through a fire hose when he first got started. I learned a lot. I wouldn't say that I became an expert. I'll tell you the expert on the Sulphur River Basin Authority is from right here in Red River County, and that is Gary Cheatwood. Gary Cheatwood Sr. I think everybody knows Mr. Cheatwood. And he's the conscience of the board. He's no longer on the board, and his spot's been taken by Aaron Rowland from Clarksville. He's on our side.
All right, cut him.
Cuthand. Well, he told me he was the mayor of Cuthand. I didn't know if they were municipality or what. Well, listen, the thing that I love about Cuthand is going to that fish fry every year.
Exactly.
And that's a big deal. Go to these rural fish fries, there's 300-400 people out there in Cuthand for that. So it's wonderful.
October, there's a stew cook-off, chili, and our stew cook-off, chili and stew. Cemetery fund.
Okay, folks, when I first got on the Sulphur River Basin Authority, the whole talk, everything was about Marvin Nichols. And the first component of it is, let me go ahead and tell you, and you know this already, water, surface water in Texas. Whether it's a reservoir, the Sulphur River itself, the bottoms, or the pond in my home, that water belongs to the state of Texas. And we can say, and I'm as guilty as anybody, I'm not going to let them take our water. But that water belongs to the state. And water needs are going to be met by the state of Texas. They're going to be met based on purpose and need. And here's a stat, and it's a sobering statistic. There's over 1,000 people that move into Texas every day. They do not bring highways, and they don't bring water. And so the big elephant that has been in the room, and we've known it forever, water planning in Texas is planned in 50-year cycles. The next planning of the cycle is 2026, which is coming up. And so the fight has started all over. There is no question that North Texas, when we say Dallas, but it's really specifically the areas around Dallas. Not so much Dallas proper, but Wiley and Salina and Frisco, that's right, places like that. They're going to have real water needs going forward. If they fixed every leaky pipe and they drained every swimming pool and they never watered their yard again, they're still going to have water. That's how much it's growing. But the first component of it is conservation. Okay? And let me give you the difference in the level of water we use and the water they use. Texas, Northeast Texas, we use 129 gallons a day per person. Now, obviously, Susan Conway, you don't personally use 129 gallons a day, but that is industrial use, that is everything, 129 gallons a day. The Metroplex uses 168 gallons a day per person. However, a little bit of credit for them. 15 years ago, they were using 220 gallons a day per person. So they have begun doing their part on conservation. The immoral part of the entire conversation is what we already know that they plan in their state water plan. Region C wants to build the Marvin Nichols Reservoir, 66,000 acres. All of this we already know here, not to mention the environmental mitigation. Everybody knows about mitigation, correct? Mitigation is saving that natural habitat within the 66,000 acres and recreating it over here. So it takes more land out of timber production, out of agricultural production, and I say that timber is a crop. I'm from Cass County with the heartbeat of the timber industry, and let me just be personal and selfish and tell you that my livelihood in the grocery business, a large part of it comes from the timber industry. So even though my land may not be mitigated, I will certainly be impacted. And Graphic Packaging is one of our largest employers in Cass County, which is the mill. And there's some real serious threats out there. If you take 200 or 250,000 acres out of timber production, that's very, very serious. Region C and the Metroplex, there are a lot of other ways to meet their water needs. You know it, and I know it. One of those is Toledo Bend. Okay. Toledo Bend has enough water to meet their needs for a long time. And Toledo Bend is controlled by the Sabine River Authority. Toledo Bend has wanted to sell them water for years. And the Metroplex does not want to build the pipeline to Toledo Bend. And then after buy the water, they'd rather come out here and take the land, and then the water doesn't cost them. Except for maintenance and so forth, but they don't have to pay for the water. And that's the hard truth of it. But I will speak to you about something that I have been looking at, and a lot of folks have been looking at, and that's desalination.
Yes.
Now, the redneck in me wants to call it desalinization, like when you were on my podcast. It's desalination, and that's hard for me to say. I practiced it today, and hopefully I won't slip tonight. The first time I met Judge Kent Cooper was in 2022. He was running to be Titus County Judge. There were 4 people in the race. Sugar Hill put him over the top that night. Sure did. We thought he was going down, and Sugar Hill Box came in, and it put him over. So anyway, but he wanted to meet me, and so he and I met for breakfast. And he specifically wanted to know all he could about how to fight Marvin Nichols Reservoir. Now, there are a lot of folks in Titus County, some of your bankers, some of your real estate people that love the thoughts of Marvin Nichols Reservoir because of the loans they get to make and the real estate transactions they get to do and engage in. Judge Cooper, and at the time candidate Cooper, has always been vehemently opposed to the development of that reservoir. Not only that, but once he was elected, the commissioners passed a resolution, correct? One of the first counties to do so passed a resolution absolutely opposed to development of the Marvin Nichols Reservoir. So he's where the rubber meets the road. He puts his money where his mouth is, and he stands up for his convictions. And that's why I think next year Judge Cooper will be reelected without opposition. But that's obviously hopeful. We hope that he doesn't have an opponent over there. But let's talk about desalination. Specifically, whether the state of Texas should make an investment at the Gulf of America, specifically on the Gulf Coast of Galveston. Now, here's why I talk about the state of Texas. If anybody has paid attention to my campaign, there are two issues that are the dominant issues of my campaign, and they're both tied. It is to eliminate forever the Marvin Nichols Reservoir, strip it from the state water plan. And the other one, of equal value to me, is the elimination of property taxes and replace with an alternative revenue source. And that's obviously very futuristic. So the state of Texas, let's say they have a $24 billion surplus, and this is just what we went through, a $24 billion surplus. They don't call it, they call it unappropriated revenue. That's what the legislators call it. The implication means that we've got to appropriate it. We can't turn around and give it back to taxpayers. I believe that that surplus, as long as you have enough in your rainy day fund, and Texas does, what, we have $30 billion in the rainy day fund or more than that, that money should be returned to the taxpayer. But the legislature's not going to do that. Okay? I'm telling you now, they're not going to do it. You've all gotten flyers in the mail that says this is the biggest property tax cut you've ever gotten, but I didn't. You might have felt it in here. I didn't. I got an increase in my property taxes. If they're not going to refund that money to the taxpayers, then a desalination project on the Gulf Coast is a worthy infrastructure investment. A 25-year plan, maybe it'll be less than 25 years, but to build that plant and to lay that pipeline infrastructure to the cities, to the areas that are going to need that water. Now, it would need to be a participating partnership with those cities. In other words, Texas wouldn't foot the whole bill. The areas that would need it, you're talking on the I-35 corridor that Chad Parrish and I spoke about earlier, that Austin, San Antonio, those areas that are going to need the water. But there's enough water in the Gulf to meet Texans' water needs forever. Until the Lord calls us home, there is enough water there. And I don't know how the folks in this room feel about desalination, but I'm the first person to make the bold statement with specific ideas that we need to build that on the Gulf Coast. And when it can be, first off, it can be a wonderful infrastructure project. Now, we talked a little bit about eminent domain. I'm not a fan of eminent domain. I had Susan Conway on my podcast. Everybody knows Susan Conway here? Okay. Susan Conway is not your social media warrior or the armchair quarterback or critic. She's one that's out pounding and fighting. So she's got a wonderful idea. I want to put it in legislation, and it is change eminent domain from public use to public necessity. Change it in the election, not the election, in the legal code, in the code books. Change that wording. Now, the word public use and public necessity is subjective. It's going to be whoever makes those decisions. But suffice it to say that it would certainly narrow that scope and focus. For instance, there are good instances of eminent domain. You can go to the Hoover Dam and look at that. Or if you have a highway that's got to expand. Or if we build this infrastructure for the desalination plant, good eminent domain is that pipeline right-of-ways that are going to take That is for the greater good. Building Jerry Jones Stadium and displacing 20 people, and they're still not winning, right? So that's not a good use of MMO money. So in this past legislative session, and I'm very careful here because the current representative Van Deer is a native son from Red River County, and I will tell you that he's been nothing but gracious to me anytime that I've been around him. We got in a really, really tough race last time. It was hard, it's bitter, but he has been nice to me before. But let me say this much. He was elected in 2014. He didn't do anything on this project in 15. He didn't do anything in 17, 2019, 2021, 2023. Until I ran against him in 24, made a big issue. Everywhere I went, I talked about, well, all of a sudden he's overthrown. It's never too late to come to the dance. But I often wonder why something wasn't done all those years ago. And I'm asking for you to give me that opportunity to represent you in the Texas House. This is what I want to do. I want to stop this reservoir. I have no further political ambitions. I don't want to run for Congress or the Texas Senate. I want to go down there and do the people's business and come back home. That's what I want to do. And I hope that you will help me in this campaign. Ask me any tough questions that you may have. I'm ready to take some questions right now, and they can be questions on any issue or anything having to do with farming. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to say, we have the power of term limits in our hands. We have that power. We talk about it all the time, but we already have the power. And Van Deaver's term is up. I'm not afraid, it needs to be. I am here to support Chris in his process of going through to be elected to House District 1. I'm actually from Marion County. We are fighting against J.D. He has the very identical voting record that Van Deaver and Cole Hefner have. And guys, this is one fight. We're all in it. We are all in it. And it's the only way that we're going to be able to save East Texas. The only thing I would like for you, that you had said specifically, that I'm trying desperately to learn more about, you talk about mitigation, and I understand mitigation, but we do know that Kyle Bass is banking mitigation credits. How does that bank work? Who is the bank? Who issues the mitigation credits? And because he's just bought 3,800 acres down on the Texas coast.
Well, what he's hoping, obviously, is that becomes mitigation property and
Right.
turn around and sell it. Okay? You've got a lot of people in Bowie County, and originally when we were trying to push Marvin Nichols out as far as we could on the Sulphur Basin Authority, we were working on reallocation of Lake Wright Pattern. A lot of folks bought land around Pattern, hoping that it would become mitigation property, they would get to sell it at a good price. So the way he does it is buys property that he believes will be in that mitigation area. And that's what Kyle's doing. But more than that, he's trying to be able to pump water
Right.
out of aquifers.
Right.
It's almost like slant drilling for oil, be able to,
Right.
to take the water under your land and pump it somewhere else.
Right.
So the legislature's addressing that. And that's why it's important to not only have these river authorities that I was on for 5 years, but have groundwater conservation districts. And a lot of them are in short supply. And I think that those things are changing. But let me say something about Representative Van Deaver. I'm not telling you he doesn't support eliminating Marvin Nichols. He probably does. I'm just saying he came to the game very late and never addressed it all those years that he was in there until we got the office. So that's my point about Gary. I take him at his word that he's for eliminating Marvin Nichols. But I'm telling you this, as long as Representative Van Deaver's been in there, and it got out of committee, that bill, to take, if it hadn't, in other words, that bill, HB 2109, House Bill 2109, was this, that if no permits have been applied for or anything, if nothing had been done in 50 years, it goes out of state water. Everybody knows that Mr. Cheatwood's been fighting it since he was in his 20s. he's in his 80s now. I mean, that long's been fine. That it would be stricken out of the state water plant. You know yourself, Susan, it never made it to the calendars.
It made it to calendars,
Right.
it never made it out.
Here's the deal.
It never made it, Calvin.
Does anybody know what a blocker bill is?
Right.
All right, I'll tell you what a blocker bill is, and I learned this at Christmas. Representative Mitch Little, when he came over to Paris, he told us what a blocker bill is. You have a list of these bills that are going to be heard, and they draw a line with a Sharpie on the page, and anything below that won't get heard. It's designed ahead of time. Now, if Gary was doing all these wonderful things for our area, and he was in a position of leadership and was close to the speaker, but he couldn't get it on the calendars committee to be heard, are you kidding me? Because they get to say, well, we just ran out of time. We heard it, but we ran out of time. Folks, I'm going to file it immediately. It's a freshman legislator. And we're going to push very, very, very hard to get it on calendars. And I'm not going to fight until we do, until we get this heard. And keep moving forward. But I intend to file legislation. This would potentially be the biggest infrastructure project that Texas has done in a long time on desalination. But, folks, we got to start sometime. And if you're dealing in 50-year cycles of water, and this is a 20-year project, get this done, it's time to do it. Yes, sir.
Salinization, whatever you say it, that would solve the whole state's problem.
It's just expensive.
I know it's expensive.
Right now it is.
But so is land, so is our life.
Yeah.
You know, they're throwing us down in the mud and tromping us dry. You know, we don't matter.
This has been.
They think their lives
Yeah.
are so much better or more important than ours. Well, their lives. That guy said at that meeting in Arlington that day that their, well, how did he say it? Their lifestyle or whatever, to keep their lifestyle or their lives
Maintain.
maintained or whatever. But you know,
All right, let me tell you about that lifestyle, and let me just give you an example of it. All right, Cooper Lake, the last reservoir, and we all remember Cooper Lake. No shoreline development around Cooper Lake, and they keep it a mud hole. But you see that in Lake Ray Hope. When's the last time you saw that?
they
Out there.
pump boat oil dry, almost keeping it
Yeah.
full.
But I'm not telling anybody here anything. I don't need to give you the history of Marvin Nichols. Everybody here knows it. What I am telling you is this is a passion of mine. And I'm in business in Linden, Texas. And if it wasn't a passion of mine, Bill Ward or Ward 2 would run me out of business over there. I say that facetiously. He and I are on the same page on all these water issues. But I'm telling you, I will fight for you in Austin.
But desalination is the only project that's gonna meet the needs of the growth that Regency's aiming for.
That's correct.
Fits their, business plan, renewable, expandable, supports all the data centers they wanna put in. I mean, it's,
And let me tell you, yes. Okay, let me tell you something else, and this is just a statistic. But when the Texas Water Development Board gives you a population statistic, take it to the bank. And I will tell you why. I did a deep dive into the history of the Texas Water Development Board, and in the Marshall newspaper in April 1969. April of 69, they said in 2020, Texas will have 30 million people. And this was 50 years before that. We didn't have 30 million, we had 29,680,000. That's how close. So when this TWDV, whether you like them or not, tells you this certain thing, that you can take that to the bank, because they do have the right stats on it. So that's just an interesting statistic. You were going to ask me.
Well, and I'm curious what Gary Van Beaver, if anything, is doing right now, anticipating the study that's going to be done on the Marvin Nichols, you know, that they, through the mediation between Region C and Region D, and they agreed to a impact study. And I'm wondering how involved he is in knowing who's going to do that, how it's going to get done, what the parameters are, etc. And I'm looking at also comparing, you were on the Sabine, or the Sulphur River Basin, so you understand the interaction between surface water and groundwater. And I'm seeing exactly what Cody Harris is going through right now with the aquifer. We're dealing with the Carrizo Wilcox up here too. And at what point are they going to include modeling between how a reservoir would affect the recharge zones to the Carrizo Wilcox most specifically? I mean, do you see what I'm
I
saying?
do. The models you're
Right.
speaking of, in what you do when a modeling is occurring on a river like the Sulphur, it's called a WAM, a water availability model. And they run those numbers. How that ties into groundwater and as a whole, I don't have any idea on whether it takes into effect. It takes several things into effect. Let me say this much. The SRBA, Region D and Region C have studied this forever. If there's any good thing about an impact study is it delays the project. Okay? So you're going to have an impact study, it will take a couple of years to do that, and it just continues to delay the project. And so, the people in this room, and I think of Mr. George Frost of the Cass County, and different ones over the years, that have fought this. I think that this reservoir, that this water project, the biggest fight ever that's taken place has been from some of the people right here in this room. Okay? Because people across the nation know about this fight. And so it's, you think sometimes that you're not heard, but you are heard, and you know it when you spoke in front of the Natural Resources Committee. And by the way, folks, I want to serve on the Natural Resources Committee in the Texas House. So Lord willing, I'll get to do that. Sometimes a freshman legislator doesn't get to do it. But then I saw some this time get to serve on the Ways and Means Committee, and they were the freshman legislators. So any other good questions for me? Any other issues? It doesn't have to just be Marvin Nichols. It be anything.
How do we get Freeze and Nichols out of this picture, especially in these studies? They've been making billions off of every one of these reservoirs built in the last 30, 40 years, or whatever.
The name Freeze and Nichols, everybody knows Freeze and Nichols.
Yeah.
They're the
How do we
consulting firm
get
that said
them?
you gotta have it. I don't know how you do it.
They've done these last studies, or they claim they've done these studies. They've used everything over and over, just change a few words or a few numbers. They do not need to be in any study that has to do with this lake if they're going to be involved in any development. Well, they're getting rich.
No, yes, sir, I know. And the name Marvin Nichols was the chairman of the Texas Water Development Board. That's where originally it was going to be called Lake Maintenance. That's what it's going
But
to be.
now, they said at one time, we can name it whatever we want to.
Well, sure.
I don't want to name it at all.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Kind of a
But
follow.
we just need to get rid of Freeze and Nichols. They're the driving force behind, other than the Northeast Texas Water Development Board and Region C, they're the driving force of this whole thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Kind of a follow-up on what he was saying, and, you know, it speaks to what you said about wanting to shake up the establishment. I'm actually from Shelby County. I am here, I own my property and am affected by this, but I feel for my neighbors because the same thing with the Toledo Bend Reservoir, if they were to expand, my daddy and my whole family, back all the way to before Texas was Texas, is in that county. And so, you know, it's horrible for the thought of these folks to have to, you know, disinter their loved ones and to have to lose those family ties. This is not, if it was about people needing the water because they didn't have a drop to drink, that would be one thing. I know we're a good loving people and we're willing to share with our neighbors and help as much as we can, but that's not what this is about. And one thing that I have noticed, and I'm sure my neighbors have too, but since lithium has been discovered, all of a sudden 271 is getting built up really good. We've got solar farms. Titus County's getting an aluminum plant. We're getting, let's see, Van Zant's getting a battery storage facility. Lamar County's getting a battery storage facility. They're getting more solar farms. Then you've got down in South Texas, the desalination plant that you're talking about, if it's in Galveston, that would probably cover the 10 data centers that Microsoft just said they're fixing to put into Central Texas by San Antonio. So this is my fear when they did the mediation. If you look at the wording, it says we're looking at comparing the feasibility with Marvin Nichols and with the Toledo Bend Reservoir. It never says it's an either or. And everything that keeps getting added and keeps getting added and keeps getting added is going to take water. And so I'm sorry, but I think they want both. It's my opinion, to be honest. And with the growth that Texas is seeing, people need to realize, and I told a couple people, but I actually heard back from she's the department chair for the geology department at Oklahoma State University. They put Marvin Nichols on top of the Talco-Mejia fault line. The Talco-Mejia fault line can possibly interact with the Red River fault line. If that were to happen, it could change the flow of the Red River, it could poison the groundwater, and it could affect the whole state. And I'm just thinking that if they don't do a seismic feasibility study, greed is going to poison us all. There won't be a Texas left to even worry about. So I appreciate what you're saying about wanting to support those natural resources. My problem, and I don't mean to come across, it's not you, but here's my irritation. I don't know if my friends and neighbors know this. Region D ratified the mediation. Region C has still not ratified that. They have not set a meeting. They haven't agreed to it if they haven't ratified it. So what's the holdup? That's been how long now since that mediation, and they hadn't had time to hold a meeting to ratify it?
Patty, I think that part of my message tonight is we can't just be no, that we have to be part of a solution.
Right.
And that solution, because water needs are real, they're coming. That solution is a desalination plant. Now, there's nothing perfect. Okay?
Right.
Let me say something about, you use a word that our area is a sacrifice zone. So you used it, that we're under siege, absolutely. One of the good projects is coming is this aluminum plant.
Yes.
That is coming to Titus County. That's a good thing.
And it is.
It absolutely is. So we're very excited, and Judge Cooper was instrumental, one of the driving forces to bring it there. So that's an example of good growth. And as you said, when we were on the radio a few weeks ago, not all growth is good. That's correct. That's correct. Any other questions for me? Ask me a good one.
You know, it's hard to be in the position that certainly the landowners are in with Marvin Nichols when you are watching a metroplex that is continuing to explode, and they're using water as their calling card through development, through water parks, through any number of things. And it just continues. And I'm from the old school. When is somebody in Texas going to finally say, you can only put so many people in the boat?
Exactly.
We had San Marcos that just turned down 3 major developments. My son lives down there. And they said, we don't have the infrastructure for you. We cannot support you. And they turned it down. So at what point do we allow common sense to drive this bus instead of greed?
Preach it.
Trust me, I do.
Absolutely. And one of the hurdles that we have is there are 30 members of the Texas House just in Region C, 10 members of the Texas Senate that are in Region C. So it's getting together and reasoning together and hearts and minds and so forth, and a lot more than that, a lot of horse trading or whatever's involved in it. But this is a fight of our lifetime, and I think it's a fight worth having.
Right, and it's like you said, it's not that we, like you said, you can't say no to everything, and you're right, desalinization is the way. Your plan would, desalinization is the only way that this is going to happen, but as she said, I know we can't say no all the time. Other counties have said no, and I'm just saying as far as Red River and Titus County goes, we're saying no to Marvin Nichols. That's where we stand.
The only other two things is rent monies. What he had proposed was to regionalize eminent domain, that if you're going to eminent domain something, do it within your region or within your district first. And I wondered what your stance was on that.
I haven't studied it. Representative Money and I think a lot on most all of the issues. I know that he's like us in this room. He's a fierce defender of private property rights.
Right.
So I don't know what his position is on eminent domain, but I would think that it would align very much with mine, unless it's something out of bounds.
The only other thing I would say completely off base over in the other part of the left field is I would like to see certainly want to know what your stance was. I've sent an email to Greg Abbott. We have witnessed in the state of Texas at least 3 major fatalities involving multiple cars and multiple fatalities with 18-wheelers. And in all 3 instances, they had a CDL that they should not have been driving in the state of Texas. And we have reciprocity laws. We have 104 in the state of Texas, 104 weigh stations. I want them all open. I want every truck going through those weigh stations. I want their bill of ladings checked. I want their logbooks checked, and I want them to check for a CDL, and if they qualify to even be driving 80,000 pounds in this state.
Well, I think we're
Glad you brought that up.
yeah.
We're working now to get our weigh station in Titus County, what they call a super weigh station.
Yes.
Where it's got the digital readers through it.
Yes.
Where they all come through there. If they're not logged in, yes.
Let me tell you what,
Charlotte,
it
you're
would
ahead of your
take
time.
30 days, and it would go throughout this entire country, and they would say, if you're not qualified to drive in Texas, get the hell out of Texas. And we're hard to miss.
Knowledge is power.
Yes.
Tell everybody, when they go to Reagan Canyon about us spending $8 million on that weigh station, it's not an expenditure.
No.
It's an investment.
Absolutely.
We'll get that money back and save our people.
Absolutely.
And make our people more safe.
Is there anybody here against the desalination plant?
No, desalinization, definitely.
I've been preaching that for years.
Well, I'm gonna put some real specific.
100% behind you two, buddy. And been that way for the last couple of elections.
There's some new stuff coming in with the DPS that we're working on.
Because that's something I witnessed. My husband is a truck driver.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
And
They're just more of the dirty trucks instead of the knowing about the registration.
they're not worried about making sure that the driver is legal. in the
Oh,
state of
legal
Texas.
drivers.
Just like we have them coming in from New Mexico. They are supposed to drop their load, go back across the border. They're up in New York loading loads. They're running 6 and 7 loads that our drivers that are legal should be qualified to haul.
Thank
These
God
guys
for
are up there
that.
hauling for $1.30 a mile.
Well, the thing that I had seen, and I'm glad you said that, because one thing that I would love, if you are able to go down and be a freshman for us, why is it, because I did just find this out last week, in the state of Texas, you can be a truck driver and not be able to read or write English as long as you're in the state. You can't go interstate, but if you can drive an 18-wheeler in the state of Texas and not be able to read the road
I
sign.
can tell you right now what a big part of the problem is. We have a shortage of truck drivers. I know I'm on the board of directors of the Affiliated Foods Company in Amarillo, Texas. And that's the distributor that sells groceries to us. And we have 105 drivers and we're 15 drivers short. And it's a constant struggle to get drivers. And that's part of the problem there.
Well, that's
How
just
you
like-
rectify that, I don't know. But as long as there's a shortage of drivers, some of those rules are going to be met. Just like a teacher that may not be fully certified, we have a shortage of teachers. It's just something that happens that way. Another question, yes, ma'am.
So, there's less than 2% of farmers and ranchers that are feeding this nation. So, I would like to know, and with you being in the grocery industry, you know how important food is.
Yes.
So, I would like to know, as far as our farmers and ranchers that, and we're dwindling down by the days, of any ideas or protections that you would have for us and our property, so that way we can function and produce what we want to do.
You know-
I mean, this is something that's handed down. I mean, you're looking in this room right now, most of them here are farmers and ranchers, and it's gone down from generation to generation to generation, and we are just being cut out slowly, dying a slow death.
Well,
So I would like to know what kind of ideas and protections you would have for farmers and ranchers to be able to do what we do best, which
Well,
is produce.
something that I've always supported, and it seems to be kind of like anti-business. And I am a businessman, first and foremost, not a politician, but a businessman. But price supports I've always thought are important. That may not be answering your question. But when the dairy farmers, for instance, dairy farmers are leaving in droves right now. And it's not because of how hard the work is, because they've worked hard all their lives. It's the fact that they can't make a living doing it. And price supports are important. Now, the Republican Party, of which I'm a member of, we all believe in freedom and so forth. But there is cost to freedom. And there should be price supports in place. You mentioned that 2%. If y'all remember Ross Perot when he ran for president, and he criticized, and this is 1992, 33 years ago, he criticized the U.S. Department of Agriculture because of how many agriculture employees they had to how many farmers there were, the ratio of it. And he made a joke that one day a lady walked into the Department of Agriculture and there was an employee there crying. And they asked, "What's wrong?" And the employee said, "My farmer died." So there's a 1-to-1 ratio between the farmer and the employee in the Department of Agriculture. But to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know what can be done. That's the best answer I can give you. For instance, in the produce business, we try to buy local all that we can, and there are less and less growers locally. Or across the state of Texas. The best cantaloupe you can buy in the United States is the Pecos cantaloupe. I don't know if you've had a Pecos cantaloupe before, but used to you could get thousands and thousands of acres. Now there's less and less and less production of those cantaloupes. Now they're in the valley. What made them so good was there's potassium in the soil. But my point to you is there are less and less farmers there and harvesters of those cantaloupes. And I don't know what the solution is. Do you have thoughts and ideas about it?
We need our land to produce.
Correct.
I mean, cut crop taxes, lower prices, fertilizer, stuff like that. You can't afford to do that.
Well, and on the property taxes, I haven't had a conversation with my good friend, the judge of Titus County, on property. You and I have never had a conversation on property taxes before. Present company excluded. Most of the time that I have this conversation on property taxes, I run into two groups of folks that are against it, and that is the Democratic Party and county officials. Oftentimes they, rightfully so, want to know how you're going to replace that revenue. And I'm thinking of some county commissioners that are as conservative as anybody in this room that support property taxes. So that's a long-term conversation we've got to have. But it is bad when somebody in an appraisal district office somewhere can decide how much my home is worth. Okay? Doesn't matter what I pay for it, they're able to make that decision. It's not like the stock I've got, and I haven't sold that stock, so I've got an unrealized gain out there. So there's some unfairness about that. What were you going to say, Judge?
There's fuel taxes and a whole lot of things that the state gets for some money that they charge for your license and things of that nature that they can give to the county, and then we can work on that as far as the property tax goes. But it's got to be a two-way street.
Yes, sir.
And they've got a lot of mandates from there that come unfunded from
The judge hasn't pulled his support for me yet, so we're
I can't endorse it, but I might like it.
yeah. Any other questions for me? I know I should have spoke a lot longer than what I did. Y'all got another hour? We'll take some.
Well, I'm surprised at the role the comptroller, the state comptroller plays. You know, I remember being in my house, and I could be in my house, and the property taxes were the same every year. And yet my city and county managed to maintain the same level of, you know, maintenance, and then all of a sudden, it's like every year now. And so I'm going, well, okay, I go down, and I'm old enough that they're frozen, and they want me to believe, why would you bribe, Miss Parr? Your property taxes are frozen. I'm going, no, they're not. You just keep raising the valuation on them. And I said, it's not right. Then they said, well, you know, we got the call from the comptroller, and they said, we're way below. We're way below.
Well, let me tell you something. You've got a candidate, and this is going to be probably the most conservative midterm election that we've had in a long time. You've got some real conservatives that are running. Don Huffines is running for comptroller. Folks, I urge you to look at him and consider Don Huffines. I'm sorry? Yeah, that's him. Yeah. Got a twin brother named Philip Huffines. Don Huffines wants to audit the comptroller's office, and he's very serious about that. He's a businessman, and let me say that as a businessman, and Judge Cooper, he's a businessman as well. He owns the Bates Cooper Sloan Funeral Home in Mount Pleasant, and we can get off on another subject on another tear about relocating some of these graves for Marvin Nichols. And he says that's something you don't ever want to do. You don't want to move graves. And that's a traumatic experience for anybody. But Judge Cooper and I have something in common. We very rarely sign the back of a check, but we've written a lot and signed the front of them as business owners and entrepreneurs. And I think that that's important and lacking in the state of Texas. Samuel Gentry, I'm so glad you came tonight. Very much. I was glad to meet you. Any other questions for me?
How do you feel on the mail-in voting? The reason I ask, I know we have a lot of elderly folks in this area. I know that they're talking about the voting reform, and I definitely believe in, you know, strengthening the voting system. Are you for mail-in ballots or no?
Well, I've always been in favor of absentee ballots. I guess is there really no difference between the mail-in ballot and absentee ballot? There is difference? Okay. I'm for the absentee ballots because I carried the absentee vote throughout House. So I was for it.
Used to be the district clerk.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Gentry? Yeah. The mail-in, what we saw in 2020 was a lot of fraud in that election. We saw it with the mail-in vote. And so, if mail-in voting was totally done away with, there would be no complaints from me on it. But there has to be a mechanism to meet the needs of those that need to vote. Correct? But there's too much fraud in it, in my book. Just like the vote harvesting that took place, you could just go to a picnic after church on Sunday and hand those ballots out like they did, and they really did do that. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist from the standpoint that I'm going to stand here and say the election in 2020 was stolen. Well, let me tell you this. When President Trump got 18% of the African-American male vote in 2020 and lost, that's a statistical impossibility. George Herbert Walker Bush only got 3% of the African-American male vote and landslided Michael Dukakis. So, everything that President Trump says doesn't always pass truthful scrutiny, would be the best way to say it. And I'm a big supporter of the president. But when he says there was fraud in 2020, there was fraud. Mail-in ballots had a lot to do with that fraud.
And you talk about property taxes and what is going to replace that revenue before, if you're going to do away. I don't hear anybody talking about how are we going to cut the waste that is in, or the biggest chunk of our property taxes, which is school, and yet every single election, Texas throws more money at the education. I'm not against that. However, what I am against is paying the average salary in the state of Texas for a superintendent is over $140,000 a year. The average. The highest paid superintendent in this state is in Victoria, Texas, and makes $535,000 a year, plus expenses. And the average teacher coming in Victoria comes in, a freshman teacher comes in at $51,090.
The state of Florida is number one in education, and they have 67 school superintendents. Texas is number 32, and we have 1,200 schools.
Right.
I don't know how you answer that part. If that part was framed as a question, I know that in Cass County, my small county, we have 7 school districts in Cass. Ultimately, it may be 100 years from now, you're going to see some consolidation in school district probably. I'm not necessarily advocating that, but to answer your first part of your question, on replacing property taxes, my idea of it would be a consumption revenue model, 7% consumption levy. You can have a 35% exemption on that. What I mean by 35% exemption is things like your counties and your school districts and your nonprofits and your healthcare system would not be subject to that.
So that 7% is on top of the 8.25.
It would be on top of it.
Okay.
Yes, it would.
And from...
In other words, you would expand it. In other words, you go get a haircut. I don't think you pay sales tax on that. I think some of the things like that would be involved in it.
How would you justify that most specifically to the poorest or to the elderly on a fixed income that they would actually pay more?
Well, folks like to say it's a regressive
I
tax.
understand.
Okay. The most unfair tax in the history of the world is the property tax. There's not any question about it. And the reason I say that is that property taxes are the one tax that you and I pay that we have no control over.
You basically pay every 30 years.
That's right. Every year, Samuel, every year you have to pay that rent on it, whether you own your home outright or not, or you get evicted from it. And here's the ma'am. You know, that's correct. And here's the thing. Your other taxes in your life, you control. Your income tax, you can invest in an individual retirement account or a health savings account. You can buy tax-free municipal bonds and lower your taxable income. Your sales tax, you have control over that. You don't have to buy a new car like Judge Cooper does every year, brand new truck. He's got a cool truck and it's got a massage deal on the passenger side. Or you don't have to buy a piece of furniture. You're controlling that tax you pay, but when it comes to the property taxes, you have no control over that. You have control from the standpoint that you can escrow or you can budget your money. But unless you burn your house down, someone else is making that decision about how much you pay. So it's unfair.
What if you only pay taxes on the equity? The equity. So as your property grows in value, you pay taxes on the
Well, and that's
equity.
true, and somebody can go back and refinance their house and lower the equity
Well-
not in place. You have those.
Well, I understand that, right.
Yeah. But I think ultimately you have to have a more fair system. And Texas isn't the only state looking at this. You've got Florida, you have Ohio, you have Missouri that are taking Florida especially taking a really hard look at how to, because it's out of control. Property taxes are out of control, and everybody, I think would agree with that. But it's going to be hard, and the decisions are tough, and there's going to be pain in that process.
What do you think is driving it? Be out of control?
Well,
You're in the
obviously
political
the spending, and here's the thing, the state of, we think about the federal government, right? The federal government operates in a big deficit. What is it? What are we, $36 trillion in debt? The state of Texas itself as a governing body is not in debt. We balance our budget every year. We have a surplus, so people don't really realize that spending at the state level is out of control either, because it's not highlighted because we're not spending. And I think that's what I like the thoughts of seeing Don Fines his comptroller to study that. And have a DOGE, a Department of Government Efficiency, which they had. It did nothing, but they had that in the legislature this time. But runaway spending is the top culprit of it, where it's your municipality. Anybody saw what city was it? Was it Houston? The commissioners of Houston last week approved $460,000 to bring the gay softball tournament to Houston, and they spent tax dollars, property tax levy. The gay softball World Series to Houston, and they paid $406,000 commission.
How is that even
Now, how do you just? Well, first off, hey, and remember this, folks. Today's Democratic Party is not your grandfather's Democratic Party, right? Totally different. I grew up, the first time I ever voted was in the Democratic primary my senior year in high school, March 1994. And you had to vote for sheriff. But the it's a different world now. It's hard to believe that we have these conversations, but we do.
Well, I know for a lot of folks, myself included, I'm actually an independent now because of all of the things that we're seeing, in the world, the arguing, the fussing, the fighting. What would you do to bring civility or try to help bring civility back to the house?
Well, first, be nice. Yeah, because we've got some down there, and they're the far right in the Republican Party, and I sympathize with them. They're as guilty as the rest of them of having a lack of civility and no decorum whatsoever. And I hope to bring that. And I will compliment Representative Van Deaver because he does bring a level of civility to that, and I would do the same thing.
That's why I don't run for anything.
That's right. Folks, I know I've reached out to a lot of y'all by messenger and so forth. I've asked for your emails and your cell phones, and it really is me that sent emails to you for that. I want to get your email and cell phone. I'm not going to spam you. I'm not going to text you to death. But when it comes time for the voter turnout, it's important that we turn out and that we take someone with us. We have a wonderful voter platform at SpencerVoters.com, and we're able to go in and identify those people that need to vote. In our platform, when someone has voted, the next day it automatically puts a check mark from the Secretary of State. That's what I want to visit with you about, Susan Hill. We're going to talk about going through Red River voters and so forth. Please, if you haven't done so, I would love to have your email and your cell phone. And I promise you, nobody's going to be spamming you. Your number and information is not going to get sold to another political candidate. It is going to be my way of reaching out to you when it's time to vote. Any other questions for me?
One more, and this one's probably going to be a tough one. We're doing this because we don't have a newspaper in Red River County. So this is our news, so that's why I'm asking so many questions. But we're going to be speaking with, other folks as well from the other parties, so if they're, at this time, I was gonna say, are you, you have a opponent, Sean?
Huffman. I actually met him this morning, believe it or not.
And so because I actually had a meeting today with a group of people, we're starting something called RID, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats Against the Marvin Nichols Reservoir. Because if we don't all band together, they're gonna do it. We gotta quit fighting, and that's why I asked about civility.
So what do you need from me on that?
I would like to know if we are able to arrange it, if you would be interested in having a debate with Sean.
To an extent, yes, when that time comes. But initially, I want to avoid that until it's he and I against one another in the general election. But I have absolutely no problem. He and I have a rapport and are able to communicate with each other. I'm in this to win. And when that time comes and he's my opponent, we'll certainly have that conversation. And yes, I will be willing to debate it. But in the primary, I really
I know.
going to focus on who my opponent is.
Well, I got to throw you a
Yes.
curveball.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. Now, that's an easy question to answer. That wasn't hard. That was easy. Any other questions for me, folks? Keith Flowers.
I'm from Lamar County. I want to circle back around to something. Someone brought up something about the mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots are definitely a problem. The mail-in ballots are not the problem in Red River County. They're not the problem in Lamar County. They're not the problem in Cass County or Morris County. The mail-in ballots are the problem in Harris County and Dallas County, where you've got drop boxes and the same person can vote 45 times. So I don't know what can be done in the legislature, but the legislature needs to do something. It needs to be implemented like it is in these counties, because I think there's very little, if any, problem that we experience, but there's massive problems in Houston. And
Vote early and vote often. Vote for me as many times as you can. Okay? Y'all folks, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.